This is how we do it in Puerto Rico. That song played like 5 times at the gym. It's a jam. Test, test. Bright Grove. Everything seems fine from a YouTube perspective. Everything seems good from, just looking to see if it's coming from Facebook. Response from him. Everything is good.
Sweet.
It's nice just having it like done early.
Done 15 minutes early, yeah.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Oh, Reed's there.
Hi, Reed.
What's up, Pat?
You can hear him?
I don't have my earpiece in yet.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm just gonna frame up the chat.
Yeah. Can you, I guess you can't do that, can you?
Ooh, we've
What?
got a different backdrop this week.
Oh, yeah, new backdrop, Reed?
Yeah, I'm back in Boston.
Ah,
Yeah. So you're seeing my mirror and the reflection of some of the things in my place.
see that's the key. You can just set it up the other way. You can decorate that side of your room, and it'll look like it's behind you.
Exactly.
Plus,
Get myself all set up here. Get my pricing. Get my everything on the go.
So I can't decide between going with Spieth again because I think he's really going to pop this week, or Jay Rose. Those are two guys that I'm thinking about.
Well, your team is better if you take Justin Rose, obviously, but
Yeah.
I went with zero Spieth and went overweight. Test. Hey everyone, welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience live Valspar Championship Draft. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to skip ahead, if you're watching this on demand, don't be afraid to give the episode a like right away, because that would go a long way in helping. And again, if you're watching this after the fact, you can no longer leave live questions for Reid and I to answer because we're not here live anymore. I'm probably asleep somewhere. But either way, you can go through it and get all the information you need, the updated information when we're talking about weather and when we're talking about withdrawals, because I'll hit you with those right away. Kyle Stanley, still in the DraftKings system, has withdrawn, and Vaughn Taylor early Wednesday actually withdrew as well. So if you were just taking a flyer on Vaughn Taylor and you've already submitted your lineups, you might want to go change that right now. If you want to go back and catch up on the shows from earlier in the week, Feinberg and Cust were on the Monday show with the picks, and Jeff Ulrich was on the Tuesday show breaking down the full DraftKings pricing. If you want to check out my work, you can do that at dkplaybook.com, which has my DraftKings cheat sheet and the field and course preview. If you go to facebook.com/thepme, you can check out my betting cheat sheet for the week, which you probably don't want to do because it's probably full of losers like it is every other week. For the audio versions, you can do that anywhere you want. Please do. Even if you don't listen to the episode, just please go download the episode, leave a nice review for me. It always helps the show out, trying to get the word out before the Masters comes. Going to have a ton of Masters coverage for everyone. You can do that on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Audio Boom, Google Play, and iHeartRadio, which is still a thing until they physically declare bankruptcy, I think. You can still use that platform, and of course, always the video versions up on the DraftKings YouTube page and the DK Live app, where there are exclusive shorts just like on my Facebook page as well. Again, give the episode a like. We're going to jump right into this, so enjoy. Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience live chat, Valspar Championship. Load up your questions in the Facebook chat. In the YouTube chat, I'm going to try to get to as many as possible because there's no time restraints on this. I can be here forever. Although I'm eventually going to get like a text message from the bosses upstairs be like, you've been on way too long, people don't like you that much, and you need to take a hike, pal. So I'll probably adhere to that when the time comes. But load up those questions. I will try to get to as many as possible. And I want to let everyone know I just posted it into the YouTube chat where I will be drawing my weather sources from. It's windfinder.com, and Tarpon Springs is the closest hunting location I've seen. I picked that one because it wasn't right on the coast, just like the course is. So they're both in about the same proximity. It doesn't look like there's going to be a huge weather advantage like it did yesterday. It looks like everything's kind of evened itself out throughout the course of the day. So keep it monitored. I mean, if you want to do an early stack, I did that an early late stack that appeared to be where the advantage was going to be, at least late last night. So I made 5 of 20 lineups that way. If people want to know about that, you can find my cheat sheet up on dkplaybook.com. You can find my betting cheat sheet up on facebook.com/thepme. And I will be drawing all my stats from fantasynational.com. If you're a member at fantasynational.com, you too can access all the stats, and you can do everything. Customizable stats. You can search it by grass type, by wind type, by course length, make a custom model, check out ownership projections, which I will be talking about a little bit with Reid Fowler from DK Live. What's going on, Reid?
Nothing much. I'm excited to be here. I mean, this is, like I've said it before, this is really the countdown to the Masters, and it's always an exciting time because that's really when you start to see golf and all these guys coming from all over the place, right? With WGC Mexico, all of these now, the European players are really getting to the swing of it. So Valspar is going to be a tough test. It's going to be exciting. And now we're seeing the old guys, right, play well. So a guy like Tiger, Phil, we'll talk about all of them.
All right. So did you do well last week? Because I did not. I hate no-cut events, by the way. I just need to skip those weeks.
I mean, I did all right. I think some of the prognostications that we had, we're a little off, mainly the Haotong call. But, you know, all in all, I think it was a nice tournament. I think we saw Spieth, right, where he's kind of where he's a little deficient right now this season is in his putting. Sharma, right, a guy that probably at the 15-minute mark where you and I talked about him, I explicitly said he had no chance to win. And
you were right. You nailed that one. He didn't win.
Right. Exactly. But it was nice. It was nice to see a guy like that come through. Right, because the guys who had him, and I think the guy that was leading throughout, Thursday through Saturday, he had Sharma, and so he was a nice play because I think the ownership was around 10% or less. So I did all right, but not anywhere near, calling it a retirement.
All right, so let's get into the chat right away. I'm going to start drawing from the YouTube chat to start. And let's see. I wonder if Pat Mayo is going to do a ticket giveaway for the Masters. I hope to. I have nothing planned as of yet. Hopefully by Monday, I'll know that to see if I can help some people get their entries into the Million Maker, because, hey, who doesn't want to compete for $1 million? And I do want to let everyone know, the Masters coverage I got coming for you that week. And it's not even going to be like that week. It's going to be like 10 straight days of the Masters, even though I have a wedding to go to in between one of those weekends, and I'm just going to hustle back. I'm going to get everything out, but this even includes, the week before, get the full preview in, and then the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday leading up to it, and then, hey, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe some pods after the rounds to preview the next day, to preview some weekend golf, and get you maybe some head-to-heads. May have some special guests lined up for that, too. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Always give the episode a like and do all that fun jazz, and leave a review if you're listening to this as it pertains to the podcast, because that stuff really does go a long way, and that's the only reason we can make these chats live and free to everybody. If people help out, just a little thing like that really goes a long way, like I mentioned. Okay, let's go to the first one. Justin Brooks says, list or nah? And I don't think that he's talking about Kevin Na. Or maybe he is, or it's like Luke List or no one, or Luke List or Kevin Na. For me, I realize that Kevin Na is going to come in at around 3 times the ownership. At least that's what I'm seeing right now, based on buzz, based on the ownership projections from FantasyNational.com. But I would personally still go with Kevin Na right now. The short game and putting has been really good, but especially the around the green work and the scoring on par 3s. Luke List is trending really well, too. I mean, you could use both of them, but if you can only use one, I would go with Kevin Na. What do you say, Reid?
I actually would go with List. I think a guy like List is, where he was, not doing well for us last year, right? It was this Tony Finau, Webb Simpson, a lot of these guys when they can't putt, right? That is the one part of anyone's game where if you get that going quickly, and if you can change it week over week, more so than you can change maybe your yips or hitting the ball left or right off the tee. A guy like Luke List is now top 10 in strokes gained total and top 10 in strokes gained tee to green over the last 24 rounds. 2 stats that I really like here. And when you saw Adam Hadwin and some of the guys that played well last year, those were the 2 stats outside of approach that really shine for the top 5 and the top 10. So actually, if I'm going between those 2 guys, it's going to be Luke List for me.
Okay, so we got some disagreement off the top. That's always good news. Let's jump over to the Facebook chat, see what's going on over there. Brian Chabane says, Pat, who's your highest owned guy this week? And I actually don't even know who my highest owned guy is this week. I have 4 or 5 guys that I really kind of concentrated my core around. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about right away is what do you do at the top? And I think that believing ownership projections, and when you're playing in these giant tournaments, even these smaller field GPPs, where you really do want to create some leverage, you have to ask yourself, what's your risk tolerance? And for this week for me, I'm going 0 Jordan Spieth, and just saying that sounds like a terrible idea. And I'm moving on to Rory. And I don't even need all that much Rory to lap the field, because right now I'm looking at the Fantasy National ownership projections at the moment, and I have Rory hovering around 6% and Spieth in the neighborhood of like 17 to 20%. So I'm getting almost 3.5 times the ownership value with Rory. Now, if you don't believe that Rory's any good, then don't use Rory. But I use him in around 35% of my lineups. And a popular combination I did is a contrarian build at the top. I did a lot of Rory and Justin Rose, because those 2 appear to be the lowest owned guys from the top end above $10,000. The way I'm seeing it right now, Stenson, Spieth, Sergio, Rose, and then Rory. And Rory is significantly down from the rest of those 4. So even if you do want to have like a Sergio, and I know fitting a Rory-Sergio team isn't really viable because of how the pricing works, I think that if you think about a contrarian stack, you can basically litter the rest of your team with chalk down the list, and then you don't have to worry about pivoting off at the $7,000 guy. Like, Rory's going to hit one of these weeks, and it hasn't happened yet because he's just been god-awful. But if you look at, if you think that Wells Fargo, for example, is a corollary course where a lot of similar players have played well between Copperhead and Wells Fargo, I mean, no one owns that course more than Rory does. And Webb Simpson, don't forget about him. So I think actually Webb is my highest owned guy. Rory I have a good chunk of at the top. Him, Sergio, and Justin Rose I have about the same among the top guys. Then I have a lot of Adam Hadwin, and I have a lot of Chris Kirk down at the bottom. Not as much as those guys, because I don't like to really push all in on a $7,100 player, but compared to the rest of the people that I have down in the 7,000, high 6,000s, I have more Chris Kirk than anyone else. What about you? Who's your highest owned guy?
Yeah, I was just looking over my lineups as well. I think Justin Rose is a guy that I'm rostering a lot, like you were saying. And a lot of what you're saying too, I'm actually putting that on Jordan Spieth. If you look at a guy, he's the highest price guy. But I look at him, and if you were able to watch his press conference, or if you got snippets from today, he really attacks the season now where he thinks the Masters or around the Masters is really when his PGA season starts. So like, let's take that sort of in the context of what he's saying. He's not playing well by his standards by any stretch, and he's still making top 10s. He's still making top 15s. If this guy finds his putting stroke, within the 5 foot, the 10-foot range, this guy's going to be unbelievable. So I have a couple shares of Spieth. I actually only have one share, like a 5% share or 10% share of Rory, but a guy that I'm rostering a lot is Justin Rose. If you look at the way he started the season, right, he won at the HSBC. The Hero Challenge is not something that I really take into account in terms of how well he's playing. And then at the Farmers, he had a top 10. He didn't do so hot at WGC Mexico, which I kind of like, because I think that a lot of us were on Rose, and he didn't have a finish that was to our liking. So I do like Rose, but if I'm looking at my roster, some of the guys that I have down in the 7,000s is Chris Kirk, and a guy I really like too is Zach Johnson, another guy that plays well against difficult tracks. And so Zach Johnson is another guy that I have as well.
It's funny. I look down on that Zach Johnson range right now, and where is he at? $7,700? Yeah, $7,700. The guys that I'm using is, I went more up to Chez Reavie. I think that Duffner's very safe. We're talking about cash games. Jason Duffner, he's 9-10 career at this course, and yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of top 10s, but he rarely has any results outside of the top 30. And if you can get your 6 of 6 in cash through the cut, then you're looking awfully good. So I use some of him, even in GPPs, just because I don't think that he's going to be super highly owned. He'll be reasonably owned, double digits, but probably low double digits, so I'm okay with that. Jason Kokrak is a flyer I took down there, Martin Laird, and one of the guys that I listed, Ross Fisher as well. I'm not really super concerned about his back right now, and if he burns 3 of my lineups to death, then he burns them to the ground. If it's keeping people off of him, I think that he's underpriced this week for where his skill set rests. I wish he was a bit better around the green and a better putter, but ball striking wise, Ross Fisher is always really good. The one name that really popped up, and you can think about how the narrative plays into this, and he's had to take over a month off now because he was in that car accident where one of his friends died, is Bill Haas, and someone who has played well at this course before, and no one is owning him this week. And if we're going to talk about par 3 scoring and saving yourself around the greens with a great short game, Bill Haas is that guy. So if I look at someone like you mentioned, like Zach Johnson, who I don't have a good gauge whether people are on or off. I have him projected right now at 11%. I believe that's what he's at. Let's see. Actual number right now, 9.8%, which is not very much. The actual lineups that we've generated have him around 10.5%. But I look at Bill Haas and scoop down a little bit, 3%. Like, I don't know exactly where he's at. He peaked in the first round in Phoenix a while back, but I just think that I'd be willing to take a shot. And you don't need to take a lot of shots because he's going to be so low owned, but I think that's a guy in that range where I would go instead of Zach Johnson. I personally have 0 Zach Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Bill Haas, I think he's ranked in the 70s, which is his worst to date. And so this guy he won, right, the FedEx. This guy is a talented player. You just don't know with something that tragic happening to him, him in the car and being, I think Luke, what's the actor's name? Luke Wilson, I believe, was also the guy who he hit or the car accident. And so you talk about that entire process where you're walking away from that psychologically. We all know that if we play golf or if we watch, the psychology of golf plays a huge part. Now, we have no idea from a professional standpoint what this guy is going through and how he's going to come back. But yeah, absolutely. If we're talking about DraftKings, we're talking about fantasy and daily, Bill Haas is a guy, like you said, he's coming in at 1 to 3%. You could really play around with those ownership numbers. And he's a guy who has been a top player. So if you want a contrarian pick, he's another one that I can't figure out how he's going to play just because of what happened. So I'm not rostering him.
Jeff McLean in the Facebook chat asks, let's talk weak him and weak him only. I mean, I could probably do that for hours, but he puts in parentheses, I was overweight on Hao Tong Lee last week. Yeah, sorry about that. That didn't really work out. When you shoot 8 over in the second round, things aren't really going to turn out well for your week. Stupid Hao Tong, making me look like a moron. Although if you do play the corollary where he won the event where Willett and Sergio won the year before, they went on to win the Masters, and you were really wanting to bet him at the Masters, his odds, a whole lot better now than they were 7 days ago. So that's something to look into. Not for me, but for people who like to play that narrative out there. How about this from Ben Wibley? Glover, Lovemark, or Troy Merritt in a GPP? For me, it would be Lovemark, and it wouldn't be close.
Yep, Lovemark for me as well. I think if you look at corollaries where he's playing on Bermuda, tough courses, Lovemark is a guy who really stood out for me. I have a couple of shares of him as well. So yeah, for me, it would be Lovemark as well. Glover, we don't really know yet, right? Like, he's popped in. He's a guy who's had talent. He's a pure ball striker. But again, we don't really know exactly where he's going to come. And if I'm paying, right, that 7,300, that if you're rostering a guy like Spieth or some of these top guys, you're playing around in this price range. You know, John Huh is another one that I'd rather roster at that same price, right? Those are the guys for me that I'm more confident in, because Lovemark comes, because it comes with course corollaries, because John Huh comes with, you know, course past history here at Valspar and has done really well. So those are the two guys for me that I'm going to be keen on and not.
I like Johnny question marks as well, but just to scale back to Lovemark a little bit, he's gained at least 3.5 strokes through approach in each of his past 3 tournaments. Even if you look back at the course of his career, he gains almost a stroke around the greens on average per event, which is great for saving a lot of birdies. Now, he did gain almost 6 strokes putting at the Honda, and it really masked how bad he was off the tee. But he wasn't so bad he was hitting it into the middle of the water, so that's a good thing. It's always funny when you see Jamie Lovemark at the top of leaderboards, because I've just been riding Jamie Lovemark for like 2 straight years now, and it just never works out. But I do like him here a little bit more than Glover, although when we talk about supreme ball strikers, Lucas Glover always falls into that category. It's like, hey, can the guy ever make a cut? Now, normally, the answer is no. No, he can't. But even to look back at him, he gained so many strokes off the tee. He gained 3.6 at the Honda and did come 17th, 3.2 at Genesis. Somehow missed the cut. And then he gained 4.5 at Waste Management and came T43. But, like, when you always see a big red number next to his name in the putting categories, in terms, like when you're on Fantasy National, it just, you know that one of these weeks it's going to swing. So Lucas Glover, for me, a lot like Keegan Bradley in a way, is if you're someone, you just don't play Lucas Glover out of the blue. You either play Lucas Glover every week and you wait for the week that he ends up positive putting and you end up catching like a top 5, or, you know, he's a great value that week, a lot like Keegan, or you just never play him. And for me, I never play Lucas Glover. I do play Keegan Bradley. If you play them both, you're going to lose all your hair just through absolute stress. So that's where I would land on that. Let's jump back to the YouTube right now. And says, I feel like you can make a good GPP lineup with like $1,100 left over this week. Am I crazy? That's from Tron Carter. I don't see a reason to leave that much on the board. I actually made one lineup that I did really like, and maybe I should have went with it, but it had $1,300 left. I was like, oh, I can just easily upgrade the bottom end of this. Like, I think Chris Kirk was my lowest owned or cheapest guy in the line. I was like, oh, I can just use that money and upgrade to Webb Simpson. I'm going to do that. So you can always, if you have that much money left over, whether it's just upgrading that middle tier to just the slightly upper middle tier or the lower tier to somewhere in that mid $7,000 range, I would always suggest doing that. If you do want to leave money on the table, I'm good with it. That just seems like a lot and it seems unnecessary. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like you're either rostering, you know, a few guys with the higher salaries, or you're really playing around and, you know, rostering all these guys that, if my math is correct, you know, it's the low 7s or the mid 7s. Right, so why try to play the ultra contrarian where you're leaving 1,300? We talk about it quite a bit. Where yes, if you want some differentials from, you know, in these huge GPP tournaments, yeah, then leave a couple $100 here or there. And if you like your roster and you like guys and there's still money out there, absolutely. But 1,300 to me is a little excessive. I think the most I'm leaving out is about $300 to $400, but 1,300 is too much.
Yeah, so he said Tron's at 11 in this example. And look, Tron, if you like your lineup with $1,100 left on the table, play the lineup. Like, I'm not going to talk you out of it. It's not like I'm sitting over here winning all the GPPs. So what the hell do I know? Almost on the live chat did I swear. Catch myself, because I'm an absolute professional. This one, why play Tiger Woods when you have Paul Casey and Ryan Moore next to him? That's from Eric Polson, or he's at least responding to someone. I encourage everyone to respond to people in the chat too. You know, just get a dialogue going. It's fun to see what other people have to say, and you know that can influence people either way. If you're just hearing it from me, it's probably wrong. So to hear it from someone else, then they're probably right, especially if it's the opposite. But I agree. If I'm not playing any Tiger this week, I don't see him having like a disastrous week, but I do. Selfishly, I kind of want him to miss the cut, so his price gets dropped down at Bay Hill, because course history is going to be factored so much into his price next week that if he misses the cut, we might get a little bit of a discount. I do want to play him at Bay Hill. And, you know, give him like a couple extra days off, which is always nice when you're Tiger. You just keep the health Tiger. That's what I want. But I prefer Paul Casey. I mean, what are we playing for with Tiger? Do we think he's going to win this week? I don't think a lot of people think that he's going to win this week. I don't personally think that he's going to win this week. And I also don't think that Paul Casey's going to win this week because he never wins. But if you're going to tell me one of these guys finished in second, it's probably going to be Paul Casey. He's just been so safe. Even last week, he ended up coming T12, and he was a disaster most of the week. This is what Paul Casey does. So I think for cash games, if you started like Sergio Casey, or even Stenson Casey. The layoff with Stenson worries me just a little bit, but Sergio Casey, you're looking pretty good to start. And Ryan Moore is someone that I do really like this week, so I would play Ryan Moore and Tony Finau, who's also in that range, over Tiger Woods. If it came down to it, I didn't play any Gary Woodland either, although he's shaping up to be a really nice pivot play because no one seems to want to own Gary Woodland. I would play Woodland before I played Tiger too. The price is too much. I'm not sure what the upside is going to be along with Tiger Woods, and I know people are going to play him. It just seems like an easy fade for me.
Yeah, same here. I think when you look at right around that roster, Tony Finau is a guy that, we really have to consider him as one of the top players. Granted, his putting is just, he stats out so nicely in every other category, but you see that on Fantasy National, that red box, when it strokes game putting, he cannot find his stroke yet. But same thing, right? If he can find a stroke where he's gaining 1 to 2, or not even, maybe just 1, he's a guy that I really like in that range. So Tony Finau, and if I'm looking at that Paul Casey, Tiger Woods area, I'm paying a little more for Justin Rose, right? Why risk Tiger Woods and why risk, like you were saying, you don't really know exactly how he's going to play. Like he played lights out for him under his circumstance at Honda, getting that 12th place, but in that price range, I'm rather going to Tony Finau. I'm paying a little bit up on Paul Casey. Even though Paul Casey is playing really well, I'm paying a little bit more because to me, Justin Rose is a guy that's coming into form more so for me and in my rosters.
Rob Phelps, I just kind of hit on this, asked from the Facebook chat, thoughts on Henrik Stenson coming off the layoff. Now, I think that Stenson's where he's such an elite player and where his skill set perfectly meshes with this course. Hey, I'll take a 3-wood off every tee and just hit it in the middle of the fairway every time and hit every green in regulation. That's why he's performed so well at this course in the past. When you're nitpicking between the top end guys, you look at price, you look at recent form, you look at course history, and all these little deciders, because there's not really much that separates Justin Rose from Henrik Stenson, but I just like the fact that Justin Rose played last week and he finally had a good final round, and just seeing him get back into some sort of consistent form is something that I need. It's not a reason to just completely avoid Henrik Stenson. I mean, you can make a perfectly logical and good case for Henrik Stenson, but when you're nitpicking between the two, I would go with Rose and Sergio over Stenson. But you like Stenson, don't you?
Yeah, I like Stenson coming in here. Again, he's the type of guy that if you look at his past course history here, he's absolutely lights out, right? And the same thing, like you do, like took the words out of my mouth. This guy is a 3-wood. He's precisionist, right? This guy can hit his 3-wood so nicely. He can club down where you don't need to hit driver off this course. Now, granted, there are a lot more par 5s and par 3s that you really have to play around with. So, yes, maybe you could have the case where driver might be necessary. But a guy like Stenson, in my opinion, is when you look at all the stats, ball striking, with strokes gained total, with approach, Stenson comes in with putting. He comes in as a top play for me. And so there are quite a bit of lineups that I have Stenson in it, just because I'm not too worried. A guy of his caliber coming off of, making essentially his first go and getting ready for the Masters, I'm not too worried about that.
Right, I do want to let everyone know the stats that Reid and I are talking about today, and the ones that you'll see on the graphical boards, are from FantasyNational.com. Members at FantasyNational.com get all the access to the customizable stats and lineup generators, ownership projections, tournament simulators, head-to-head matchups, custom models. You can create all this stuff yourself on the site at FantasyNational.com. Plus, if you get the month trial right now, it will take you up to the Masters, so think about that. When you're trying to test it out. It's not too expensive, so you might want to do that. Leave your questions and comments inside the Facebook and YouTube chats, because Reid and I are going to be here more with you in a while. Let's go back to the Facebook chat. I'm going to combine 2 questions right now, and it is from, let's see here, Silas Van Sky and Chris Null. Chris asked, what do you guys think of Stricker and Hoffman in GPPs? And Silas asked, thoughts on Stricker this week coming off a Champions Tour win. Keeps playing well on the big tour. Is this course more geared for precision players? This is a course more geared for precision players. And he's right. I have Steve Stricker in GPPs. I have Charlie Hoffman in GPPs. I bet Charlie Hoffman to win this tournament outright with an each way at 80-1. So I like both of those guys. With Stricker, when you look at it, if it's going to be a score fest, I know he's won John Deere, but that's like basically his home course, and he can get to 25 under. He can make birdies because of his short game. on this place. He's not bad at par threes. You always have to wonder, this is over 7,300 yards. It's a longer course, and we know that Steve Stricker isn't the longest player on tour. The guy's ancient. But he's going to put the ball in the middle of the fairway. He should be good for a cut. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to using Steve Stricker in cash if it came down to it. But I think that he can generate enough placement points this week that he is a viable GPP play. My two favorite GPP plays from down in that range, I like Charles and I like Snedeker only because of win equity. I think that they're inherently more risky than both these guys, but I think that they have a better chance to win. And if you're playing large-scale GPPs, I think that you want to have more weight onto those two. But I am definitely not against, and I have used Hoffman and Stricker. What do you make of Stricker?
Yeah, I think Stricker, we always talk about it, right? If you're a fan of golf, a guy like Stricker really plays, I mean, not so much like all of us, but his short game is fantastic. There was a point where Tiger Woods was getting putting tips from Stricker. So this guy, garners a lot of respect from the pros. We just saw him win on the Champions Tour. So yeah, he's coming into a course where, yes, when we're talking about it, you have the club down. It's about precision golf, ball striking approach. Stricker is a guy that comes through in my stat model is top 25. So I really like him. And when you talk about a guy like Hoffman too, as well, this is really when Hoffman starts to play well. Right now, if you look at his statistics and that's it, you wouldn't choose him, right? You wouldn't go after a guy like Hoffman. He's not playing well. I think strokes gained total, he's somewhere around this, ranked 70th over the past 24 rounds. But this guy plays extremely well in majors. He plays extremely well against difficult tracks. And so I also like a guy like Charlie Hoffman. I do have some shares of him, but if I'm talking about this range, I really like a guy like Chesson Hadley. He was cursed at the Honda. If you look at all of the tournaments before that, and then up into the Honda, he just absolutely blew up, which is why I really like him as a GPP because outside, if you take that out as an outlier, this guy is absolutely striking the ball extremely well. Ball striking, strokes gained total, approach, everything is standing out really nicely. So if I'm going in that range, my favorite GPP is Chesson Hadley.
Yeah, he's not my favorite. I used him in some of my AM stack lineups just because it was a very fortunate draw for what I was looking at for Chesson Hadley. But it looks like people are going back to him. People, now that he's uncursed, that people seem to be on the level. Maybe it's just members of FantasyNational.com because that's where the site draws its data from, is the actual user base. But right now, we have him well into the double digits. We'll see if that actually translates into the general public because he does rate out really, really well, especially when you look at short and moderate term models. Like in the very, very short term, obviously he did not have a good Honda Classic, although he did still gain strokes with the approach. He just lost them all around the greens, which is very atypical for him. If we're talking ball strikers, like you mentioned, there's very few players on tour who have been striking the ball as well as Chesson Hadley has so far this season. Let's go to the YouTube chat, and Trevor asks, there it is. Owen asks, is Austin Cook a good value at $7,100? Don't forget that Austin Cook withdrew before the Honda Classic, somewhere where I was very curious to see him, but he's lost strokes through his approaches in each of his past two tournaments. Now, was he bothered by his wrist? Potentially. This is golf. We never have a clue. He just never really came up for me. I feel like he went through his hot streak. I think you might see a little bit of a downturn for Austin Cook as he kind of plods his way through. But he too is getting ready for the Masters after winning the RSM earlier this year. I don't hate it, just not for me. You using any Austin Cook?
No, a guy right there, right near him is Chris Kirk. I'm going to be more on him. And Bo Hostler, presents an interesting play. He's that young kid that it really shows that he's got, essentially all the shots in the bag. So I'm also just looking at Bo Hostler a little bit, not necessarily for DraftKings, but maybe playing some Bo Hostler in terms of a first round because he's a guy that can score as well. So I'm not playing any Austin Cook, but more so Chris Kirk for drafting purposes.
Yeah, my big problem with Bo Hostler is that he was really going with his putting earlier in the year. That was really saving him because he's lost strokes with his approach in 6 of his past 7 events. And he actually performed well in some of those, and he would always just falter on Sunday when the putting wasn't dropping for him. So if this does become a putting fest, he is a pretty good putter, so that could really work. And he does have winner's experience because he went on the mini tour and was playing really well a few years ago. So I don't mind Bo Hostler, not for me. I have the next question coming right now from the YouTube chat, again from Wes. Opinion on Hudson Swafford, been playing surprisingly decent other than the last round of the Honda Classic. Makes all the cuts here and fits the bill. I like him more as a bet than I do as a DraftKings play, strangely enough, because you can get him at like 250 to 1 on some books, which is kind of crazy. I get it with Hudson Swafford, though. I do worry that a lot of his stats were influenced. Like if you look at his strokes gained approach from the Honda, -3.5. But how much was that have to do with the last round of the Honda where he was probably like -8. So it really did weigh him down a little bit. He's played well at Career Builder. He played well there this year. He won it the year before and does have a good track record at Valspar over the years. Like he made the cut, came T38 last year, T56 the year before that, and then missed the cut before. So he's made 2 consecutive cuts. It's just, I don't want to dabble down in this range too much. Like I prefer Grayson, Ben Martin, those guys over Hudson Swafford, but I understand the angle. What do you make of Hudson Swafford?
Yeah, I think one of the only stats that really comes out with Hudson Swafford is greens and reg gained, right? I think he's top 25, but every other stat over the last 24 that I'm looking at, approach, tee to green, overall, right, putting, he doesn't stat out very well. So yes, if he can miraculously, right, I mean, and stats aren't everything. Please take this with a grain of salt. Stats aren't everything, because if they were, right, every single person would be winning money.
I was going to say, I'd win a whole lot more if stats actually mattered that much. But it gives you a picture of, because listen, this is the PGA. We don't have the ability to go back and watch every shot from every player because it doesn't exist. So this is what we got to deal with.
Right, and Andercuss is saying, right, he loves that 30-minute break right in between. I was listening to that's the worst take ever. I don't get why people would want to break, but when you look at like a guy like Hudson Swafford, yes, he has the ability. We've seen him pop in the past, but if you look at that price range, Aaron Wise is a guy that I'm looking at, right? Grayson Murray, Ben Martin, those guys at the top. Rory Sabatini is another guy that does play well against difficult fields. So I'd rather roster those guys before, but you're right. If you're spending a lot of time in this area, that obviously means, contrarily, you have a lot of at the top at Jordan Spieth. So if you are playing around in this area, Aaron Wise, Grayson Murray are the guys that I would go in with.
All right, so next question involves Harold Varner III. HV3. Is he worth playing in that 6.9 range? I like Ben Martin, but Varner is catching my eye. The only long-term stats really that point to Varner is his par 3 performance, especially from 200 to 225 yards, where 3 of the par 3s will definitely fall, and 2 of the other par 3s could get sandwiched into that range too. All 5 of the par 3s this weekend, there are 5 of them, are over 190 yards. So it depends on the tee boxes that day and some of the pin placements. But he doesn't really do it for me. That is the only thing that he's doing well. You mentioned Ben Martin. I like him significantly more. You can go up to 7,000, find a few guys. Even someone like Harris English, I like a little bit more, or just drop down or stay at the same price and take Grayson Murray, who I just think is a better player. If you want to throw like a first-round leader bet on Harold Varner, that I understand. But other than that, no thanks for me on HV3.
Yeah, me neither. I think there are guys that are playing a little bit better than him, or a lot of bit better than him at this price range. And so, right, like you said, if you're playing around and you want to, max out your salary, and this is the guy, and so you're trying to make that case for him, change a couple of players here and there, go 100 up or 100 down, so you can get a guy that you might be a little bit more comfortable with at 7,100. Do that as opposed to say, okay, let's try and make a case for Varner when really stats everything is not really panning out for him.
Anyone know what the ownership on Stricker and Zach Johnson are going to be? They seem like great course fits, and they do, but don't overlook the bombers here. Just don't do it, because these guys can club down. Even someone like Rory, when you start putting a 3-iron in his hand, he's still hitting it farther than Steve Stricker and Zach Johnson are with their driver. So if that increases his accuracy, he can turn into that type of player pretty quickly. We've seen Gary Woodland win here before. We saw Tony Finau come inside the top 5. He led this field in tee to green a year ago. It hit big shot. Spoiler alert, couldn't putt. Big shocker from Tony Finau. But again, these are the types of players that you can look at. Lovemark was very high tee to green last year too, and just bled away all of his strokes on the green. The one thing with Stricker is you never expect him to have a poor week putting because he is such a good putter, so that could help. But just because they seem like good course fits because of their skill set, Chez Reavie is another one who fits that bill to a T. That you don't just focus on the shorter hitting accuracy guys, because that's not always necessarily the play. Like we watched Patrick Reed and Jordan Spieth get into a playoff here against each other one year. Like neither one of those guys hits a ton of fairways, so you have to take that with a grain of salt when you look at it. In terms of the Zach Johnson ownership and the Stricker ownership right now, I mentioned Zach Johnson a little bit earlier, and he is rating out, like I said, 9.8 to so it's going to be like 10 to 12% on Zach Johnson. For Steve Stricker, we're looking at almost the same range, but like 7 to 10% for Stricker. Someone asked about Jordan Spieth, what his ownership is going to be in GPPs. And again, that depends on the size of the GPP, the buy-in for the GPP. And I'm just going to be talking about the large $3 right now because it's the cheapest one with the most people. So we'll just factor it in for that. But right now, I would guess, I know this sounds like a kind of a cop-out because of the wide range, but I would say anywhere between 17 and 25%. My actual guess would be 21% for Jordan Spieth. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's going to be high teens, if not over that 20 mark. You know, like I said, he sets up nicely here, and this is why he's the highest priced guy. Because if you look at his course history, right, if you kind of look at how he's played since Valspar on, this guy is one of the, if not the elite player on tour. So yeah, I would say around that. You'd be lucky if you get Jordan at a 18, I think 17%. But I think you're right. I think we're gonna see him at that 21, 22 mark. And you're right, Steve Stricker and those guys, you're going to get them at 10% or less. Even if you get them a little bit higher, they still provide extreme value at that price.
Checky 3 Sticks, CH3, Charles Howell III, or Chesson Hadley. I actually preferred Hadley this time around, and so do you, I'm guessing, because he's your favorite GPP play from down in that range.
Yeah, but CH3, he always makes, we talk about this all the time. He's a guy that makes cuts, right? So if you want a safe route and if you want to get guys through the weekend, right? That's what he does. So, at the risk of sounding repetitive, Charles Howell makes cuts. Always remember that. He doesn't necessarily win. I don't think he's won in quite a few years, but I like Hadley a little bit more.
Eric asked if there are weather concerns. It looks like everything has evened itself out, but we covered this earlier in the chat, and I posted a link both on the YouTube and Facebook chats about the wind station that I am using, so you can go check that out and make some decisions for yourself. Last night, it did look like it was leaning early stack, but now it seems to have evened out a little bit, but I still do have a few early stacks in the mix. I played 6 of 20 lineups with an early stack, so that's what I'm up to for the Valspar Championship. Evan asks, what are the tricks for weekend golf you've found since it started? Just in a nutshell, if we're just talking about very rudimentary stuff, honestly, sometimes you can click through the players and look at tee to green, or maybe you can find a list online and someone on Twitter. Sometimes Chris Hollander's a really good one that I always retweet out if he ends up posting it for that week. But just basically take tee to green minus strokes game putting and see who rates the best in that, and boom, you're looking good. Just find just find the bad putters who are reaching at tee to green.
Right, exactly, because that's what we talk about, right? They can turn around the really good ones, obviously all of these guys are pros. They can get on the putting green and they can potentially just one little switch if they're able to make that change. From day to day, these guys are so good that they can make that change. Now, there's guys like Finau right now, right, and Paul Casey, some of these guys that just historically have been bad putters, but a lot of these guys can make that change way better than we can. So that's like you were saying, tee to green, sans the putting.
If you're looking for more weekend coverage, I did a big show at the beginning of the year with Jeff Bergerson from FantasyGolfInsider.com and Ben Raza, 2 regulars on the Pat Mayo Experience. He's from FanVice.com. We sat down and did a full strategy session on how to construct lineups, how to build your cores, all that kind of thing. You can find that on the DraftKings YouTube page. You can find that on the Pat Mayo Experience feed, whether that be on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Audio Boom, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Leave a review while you're there, or just subscribe and download. You don't even have to listen to it. Just the downloads really do help. So do the reviews. That is up there, so you can find that on demand. Or if you just go to DK Playbook, at the top of all my columns, that is easily the best way to find out everything that I've done this week. There's a links template, and one just has all that stuff in it. And it has it with a by feature on demand that it'll bring you directly to that part of the video. And one of them is weekend golf, so you can get our thoughts on how to best strategize and construct rosters and the stats to look for as it pertains to weekend golf. Let's go back to the Facebook chat for a second. Steve asked, Duffner or Reavie in GPPs? I like Reavie.
Yeah, I actually like Duffner. I think Duffner, I'm going to have a lot of first-round leaders in Duffner. He's a guy, too, that if he gets his putting stroke, he's one of the most pure ball strikers that we have on tour. So if I'm going between those two, I just think Reavie right now, we talked about it a little bit in the past shows, that he might have hit a wall that we don't necessarily know what's going on. And yes, he statted out very nicely at the beginning of the year. He played really well, almost won. But for me, it's going to be Duffner in that spot just because of past course history. And when he hits the ball well and when he's putting relatively well, this guy can really contend.
I like the reason that I can go back to Chez Reavie here is because, I mean, the hit the wall is all narrative, because we said Brian Harmon hit the wall, and then all of a sudden he's at the top of the leaderboard, WGC Mexico. So maybe and Chez played last week, didn't play great, but didn't play super poorly either. So I'm going to give Chez the benefit of the doubt here. I hope he can start rolling it on Bermuda a little bit better. But tee to green, there's been very few players all year long who've been as good as Chez Reavie. So I'm going to continue with him right now, and if he lets me down, he lets me down. And I mean, with Duffner, we know he has probably a higher win equity, but just every single week he can make the cut, but he's like T37. That's the classic Jason Duffner, especially at this course. Spencer asks about Keegan Bradley at $7,000. I'm in on Keegan. He's 10% in my lineups this week.
Yeah, I guess I can never figure out when Keegan's going to hit. You know, he's another guy that hits the ball.
It's like Lucas Glover, though. You take these ball strikers, these tee to green guys, and then boom, you either commit to them all the time or you just take yourself out of the running and never roster them. And Keegan is the one that I choose to just roster every week, and he's actually been pretty good this year.
Yeah, he's like a poor man's Rory, right? You have to keep on playing Rory if you're in on a guy like Rory who hasn't played well but has the talent to absolutely obliterate the field. You got to keep on playing him. But a guy like Keegan, I'm not going to have any shares of Keegan. You know, I'd rather go up. Like I said, Sam Saunders is another guy at that same price that I have more shares and a little bit more confidence in. I'm trying to stay away from this range as much as possible. But if I am, you know, I'm going elsewhere.
Patrick, very quality name, asks, it's almost the same thing that you just mentioned. He has a hunch that Rory's going to win easily this week. And that's what we're going to see from Rory one of these weeks, where he's just going to win by 20 strokes. It's going to be like, oh, it's a Rory week, and he just obliterated the field. And listen, I don't know if it's going to happen this week or not, but when you can give me Rory at like 6% ownership, I'll easily go overweight on that, because the big thing with Rory is that when he wins, he outscores everyone in terms of DraftKings points generally by a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting Rory at sub 10%. I mean, even if you're getting him at 10, I mean, what is the line of demarcation that you would take Rory, right? It would probably be 15% ownership projection or lower. So if you're getting him at less than half of that, of course you would be a heavyweight on Rory, because, I mean, look at that. The odds of this guy winning, right, because he hasn't been playing well, he has all the talent in the world. He's a former number one. This guy is going to hit at some point. I just don't know when. And, you know, I'm not going to have too many shares. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, go with your hunch, right? If you feel something, if you feel like you want a roster or have a roster that's $1,300 less than the salary cap, then, yeah, go ahead. Because if that hunch hits, you're sitting pretty.
Mark asked about Tiger. We already covered it. Any Tiger? The answer for the both of us? No Tiger this week. This guy says Keegan's a trap. Keegan's always a trap. Like, let's be real here. I just can't help myself. And if Rory hits, I really want it to be the U.S. Open for my bank account purposes. Just he can be crap all the way up to the U.S. Open and just win the U.S. Open, Rory, and we're square for life with that one. What about Ollie? Drew asks. He has no hat, which is always a good thing. Better player on Bermuda. We saw him pop at Heritage, another place where a wind can pick up a little bit more, but tree line fairways, he can hit those long irons. Everyone's kind of off the Ollie bandwagon right now, and myself is included with that, but I know Feinberg's in on Ollie. He has the soft spot for Ollie. I can see it. There are too many other options I just prefer more, but if you're in on Ollie, I don't really see a big negative against him here. Are you playing Ollie?
I'm not, just because I said I'd rather pay a little bit up in that price range. So I'm not in on Ollie. But like we saw it, right? We saw it at Waste Management. This guy can really strike the ball, especially with his long irons. If you look at the most approach shots last year at this course from top 10, top 15, first in general, it came from that 175 to 200. And so proximity, a guy like Ollie does play well or does pan out well in the statistical category, but I'm not seeing it as an all-around for Ollie, so I'm not going to have a lot of shares. I'm not going to have any shares of him. I'm going to have more shares with the other guys in that price range.
Mark asks, who's the cheapest best play this week for a GPP? I had originally thought it was Von Taylor, but he withdrew, so what are you going to do? I had to go change my lineups this morning when that happened. But for me, the only guys below $6,000 or $7,000 that I'm really interested in using are Grayson Murray and Ben Martin. That's it for me. You can make you can make your cases for Sabatini. I think he's down in that range. You can make your cases for Robert Garrigus, but those are the two guys that I like.
Yeah, and what do we always say, right? You want win equity down in there. So if I were starting at that, and I'm trying to guess who's the best, right? That's sort of the name of the game, right? What's the best value for the least amount of money? I'm more in on a guy like Aaron Wise, Grayson Murray. Again,
Well,
Sabatini.
I got to ask you about Aaron Wise. People love Aaron Wise. I absolutely do not get it. What are we seeing from Aaron Wise? I feel like if I want him in a place where he can take out the driver and just outdrive the field.
I just like it where he's gaining strokes tee to green, and so and for me, when I look at my models, and if again I'm playing in this price range, I want a guy who's playing well tee to green. I want a guy who has win equity. Yes, if he has more acumen when it comes to the long courses, but he's playing well, right? He's playing well, and to deny someone just because he doesn't necessarily pass the eye test of the short course, the same way we all have hunches about certain players. You know, a guy like Aaron Wise is someone that I've seen a lot of my rosters, especially if I'm rostering a guy like Speed. So I like Wise a little bit more because of that.
Well, I mean, if he continues with the trends of his performances lately, dating back to the OHL Classic, hey, hell, we can just even start at Shriner. Shriner's 32nd, OHL, missed the cut. RSM, 13th, that's great news. Sony, missed the cut. Career Builder, 17th. Farmers, missed the cut. Pebble Beach, 15th. Genesis, missed the cut. Now, he made the cut and came 33rd at Honda, so he's due for a missed cut here, so watch out for that. The only other guys down there that I can see as flyers, like I said, I really like Chris Kirk at $7,100, but I don't think pushing all in on him is the wisest move. So so I cropped up some of his ownership and exposure and put it onto a few other guys in that range, and that would be Retief Goosen, two-time winner of this event, who kind of just sporadically pops up with great iron games, always plays well at harder courses as well. Sangmoon Bae is someone I put a few shares on. Keegan and Harris English was the other one. So that's where I'm looking at. Scott Brown and Johnny Question Marks just above that too, as just random flyers, like 2 of 20 lineup guys that I'm looking for. Let's go back to the YouTube chat, see what's going on over there. NDW, thoughts on Louis and Chez for GPPs? I went with Chez, I didn't go with Louis. Louis breaks my heart, and I just can't do it. I went with the other 2 South Africans. I went with Brendan Grace and I went with Charles. I have no Louis. Do you have any Louis?
No, I'm in the same camp. I think Brendan Grace, this course sets up really nicely for him, right? We want Grace on difficult tracks, and this is one of them. Look at the last, I think, 3 years. If you're looking at Fantasy National, how the course is played, it's been difficult to, right, it's a little bit harder than average. It hasn't played easy for the last 3 or 4 years based off of, right, where the guys finished and all the statistical analysis. So, you know, that's what you want. Louis is a guy, like you said, he has all of the intangibles, but for whatever reason, when it comes to the weekend, we're not seeing it from Louis yet. But is that nice for a Masters play? Will his odds go a little bit higher because of that? For this tournament, I'm not on Louis. I'd rather go Charles Grace.
Yeah, I like Louis at the Masters too. He just seems to be kind of rounding it. Even at the WGC match play is another really good spot for Louis. And now watch this be the week that Louis wins and he's garbage at the other 2. Then we look like morons. But you know, I look stupid enough on a weekly basis. I'm just getting used to it. My skin is thickening on this, just being wrong all the time. So I'm just not playing Louis this week. The next question from the YouTube comes from, where is it? Free time. Who's popping in par 3 scoring and bogey avoidance this week? And this is something that's very easily searchable and customizable if you're a member at fantasynational.com. Just saying. I'll look over the past 24 rounds, and I can't give too many away because people are paying for this stuff, but guys that correlate really well between the 2, Chez Reavie is by far the best one over the past 24 rounds when it comes to. Another good guy is Henrik Stenson. Obviously, a lot of those numbers are derived from last season because he has no stats that have been measured from 2018 because he has not been playing on the PGA Tour. He's been over in Europe. One more guy that correlates really well is Webb Simpson. 10th in bogey avoidance over the last 12 rounds, 10th in par 3 scoring, and I really do like Webb a lot here. It seemed like people kind of jumped off the bandwagon a little bit after last week, and they're like, oh, he can't ride a hot putter forever, and I agree. He can't ride a hot putter forever, but his tee to green game historically has always been really good, so I like him. He's sort of like the rich man's Kevin Streelman this week. I like both those guys, but Webb I like a whole lot more. Next question from YouTube is... You mentioned Bo Hossler, so you answered Tim's question without even trying to answer it, so congratulations to you, Reed. Tim, we'll get back to Tim. Finau has 0 value at 28 to 1, cannot putt. I mean, It's not for me because I kind of agree with you, but Finau's so close. Maybe Valero is going to be his spot because he tends to do his best putting on bent grass. Weirdly, I was looking through the Masters simulation, and Tony Finau for the tournament simulator actually pops really well at the Masters, which I kind of find funny because I just don't see it. But apparently, he scores really well on holes from that length. I really went underweight on Finau this week because I know he's going to be popular. I've already said I like Casey and I like Moore better in that area, but if you had to power rank all the guys in the $9,000 area, just throwing price out, just those 5 names, what would you do?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be Finau first, then Gary Woodland, and then I would go Paul Casey. Again, this is based off of, right, like just current form and what I'm looking at for this tournament. Like Paul Casey is a fantastic player, but I'd rather be rostering a guy like Finau. He's passing the eye test for me. His course corollaries, his past history here, he's played really well. So I'm going Finau, right? Casey, Finau, Woodland, Casey, and then more than Woods for me.
Nate asked, man, you got to talk about the 20 to 30 mile per hour winds on Sunday. Look, I don't know who that's going to affect. If I knew who was going to be affecting, I would have far more guys at the top of the leaderboard on Sunday. Like, maybe you can figure it out. Maybe that's a much better factor for weekend golf. That's way too difficult to project out at that point because, listen, it looked like there was going to be a big AM/PM wave stack last night and even early this morning. Now I look at it again, it's all leveled itself out. If the storm doesn't come on Sunday and it comes Monday morning, then we're talking about nothing. It's a really, really tough thing weather-wise to project out from 5 days in advance. So if you want it to affect your weekend golf, I think that makes a lot more sense to try to project it out now. We just don't know which players it's going to affect. You can say, hey, Brendan Grace plays really well in the wind, which is actually untrue because he doesn't actually play all that well in the wind. He just plays well at hard courses. Sergio has always been a really good wind player. So if you do want to back something like that, sure, go for it, but it's not anything that I'm really going to project too much because if it's that bad and there's thunderstorms, they're not playing golf on Sunday. And then you get back out, there's no wind, and the course is super soft, and then Rory wins by 20 strokes because he's going to hit in the fairway and hit everything to 1 foot. Can't miss those ones. I mean, I shouldn't say exactly. That. He might miss the 1-footers. Spieth misses every 2-foot putt these days, so Rory can miss a 1-footer.
Yeah, it's like when you look at the generalities, right? You can't predict like who's going to be in the afternoon groupings now and then on Sunday, and then also you can't predict, what's going to happen in terms of the wind. But for general sake, right, wind players, guys who are good in the wind can hit the ball low, can drive it low. Guys like Jason Day who hit the ball high, right, and long, you might not necessarily want to play, but now, like you said, you're trying to play weather projector and say because of that, a guy like Jason Day is not going to play well. Maybe, but if you want some place to start, it's there. Guys who can drive the ball low, guys like Stenson who can hit those long irons off the tee, Ollie Slatterjans. Those are the guys that you want to look at if you're making that choice to project it now.
Justin asked when the next baseball show is going to be. There's going to be a bunch of baseball content coming out on the Pat Mayo Experience. I got Joe Pizzapede to talk auction and snake draft strategy. Garion's going to be back in studio to talk about his bounce back players of the year, hitters, and pitchers. And then Mike Leone from DailyRoto.com will be doing a complete DraftKings Major League Baseball strategy session, cash games, GPPs, player selection, tournament selection. So that'll all be coming out within the next 2 weeks. And then me, Gary, and Cuss are going to have to go over the win totals. How couldn't we do that? We always got to do that. And I have my draft coming up, so I actually need to start prepping for some research here. But hey, just subscribe to the pod, subscribe to the video feed, and boom, you're good to go. Never miss a show. Ryan asked, should you play Glover this week? We went over Glover already, so you can rewind, watch that on demand. I just had one about Patty Harrington. Where'd it go? Michael asks, how do you see Patty Harrington in GMAX game lining up for Valspar this week? And someone else even asked about Patty Harrington getting himself into the Masters narrative. I'm off Patty Harrington. I just can't do it. Watch him pop this week. The short game is still impressive. The rest of his game, bottom of the barrel. GMAC, I actually do kind of like, but I always prefer GMAC when there is more wind overall, and he just wins on coastal courses. And well, this is close to the ocean, not a coastal course, so no GMAC for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp as well. I mean, like I said, Harrington, yes, right. There are some corollaries, and there's some stats, and there's a narrative out there that you can play Harrington, but no way. GMAC's the same. Like you said, GMAC does play well against difficult tracks. Right, he plays well in majors. He's been proven to have success on the tour. So yeah, of course. I mean, like I said, if I'm in that price range, I'm going with Lovemark, Charlie Hoffman, a little bit more than GMAC. If you're betting, obviously you're getting more value with Graham McDowell at 110 to 1, but I'm just not rostering any GMAC on my DraftKings lineups.
So from the YouTube chat, we have, where did it go here? Free Time asked about Sammy Burns. We all remember Sammy Burns from beating Tiger on Sunday at the Honda Classic. Played really well that week too. I think you're banking on upside here based on pedigree. And we've done this in the past. Patrick Rogers and Jamie Lovemark. When's the breakout going to happen? And then it doesn't happen for like a year and a half. You're like, oh, these guys are garbage. And then they start turning it around a little bit. Sam Burns seemed to have jumped on the scene a little bit more. The problem is, I think people might just actually be on him because they saw him play with Tiger. They know who he is, and he's super cheap. I don't think he's a disastrous play. Not for me, though.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, we only had really one. Unless you watch quite a bit, or you watched quite a bit of Burns and you know his game. Yeah, he showed a lot of talent. But again, at that price range, we talked about it, and it looks like a lot of people are trying to figure out what they're doing in this 7,300 to low 7 range. Again, go with win equity. Sam Burns, yes, he showed some promise, but there are guys in that price range that have much more experience in win equity, and that's really what you want down there. Because at 7,300, it also means that these guys aren't necessarily playing that well, or else they wouldn't be priced at this level. So, just temper expectations, and if you're in that range, go for win equity.
I will say that Sam Burns, in 4 starts in the 2018 season, now 2 of those were in the swing season, he's made the cut 3 times, has a 20th, 8th, and a 43rd, along with a missed cut at the Farmers. So he's not a terrible play by any means. It's just, if you think that he can get that breakthrough, this field is a bit too loaded, though, especially at the top end. And even the second tier of players, like when we talk about the Ryan Moores and the Webb Simpsons, just those guys' games are on a completely different level. I do want to throw this name out here because no one has even asked about him yet. And he's one of my core guys and one of my favorite players of the week. And he is in that mid-range. I love Cameron Smith at $8,000. Just play Cameron Smith. The guy's legit.
Everyone's on Cam Smith. I mean, rightfully so. He is.
I don't know if everyone is going to be on him. I think people like him more as an outright bet than they do on DraftKings, which is kind of crazy because he's only $8,000. But short game, long irons, I mean, that's the Cameron Smith game plan, and he did play really well at Genesis the last time we saw him. He's scoring on par 5s right now as well, still scoring on those par 4s. So I just wanted to make mention that I do really like Cameron Smith this week. I don't want to seem like I'm out in the dark on this, but he does really seem like a guy that was really popular on Monday, and as the week has gone along, it seems like people have jumped off because they think he's going to be too chalky, and that might actually influence where his overall ownership ends up.
Yeah, he's playing really nicely. I think he's around top 15, top 20 in strokes gained total. A guy over the last 24 rounds, he's playing really, really nicely. I'm just looking at that price range. Look, I can make a case for Cam Smith. I think I do have him in a couple lineups, but I'm going a little bit lower at that price range if I'm rostering guys like Jordan Spieth, some guys at the top there, and I'd rather go, like I said, a little bit lower at Jason Duffner. And I just haven't seen it yet from Cam Smith outside of recency bias. So.
All right, let's start rapid firing through these so you can still leave your questions. We can still go for another 10, 20, 30 minutes, maybe 3 hours. Who knows? Shane Lowry this week, not for me. He's been playing like garbage.
Yep, same here. Not for me.
Okay, the next one we'll talk about Byung-Hun An. Do you like Byung-Hun An at $8,400?
Nope.
Yeah, see, I'm not on Byung-Hun An either. This guy says that he feels like an outsider that wins this week. This is Tim again. He feels like a Ted Potter Jr. type. Do you see it?
No, I mean outsider, but what defines outsider? Someone that we don't know.
Well, I guess Ted Potter was 250 or 300 to 1 when he won that event. Like the guys that I took long shots on this week, Kirk was above 100, but that's even too probably big of a name. I'm always on Siwoo when it comes to the betting markets, not so much on DraftKings. And Sang Moon Bae is the other one. I like Sang Moon now.
Yeah, I mean, out of the dark, I think it'd be tough because, like you said, this field is so loaded. I mean, it is the strongest field that Valspar has seen in quite a while. So I don't think an outsider wins. If anything, you might see like a JB Holmes or some of these guys. Duffner is another one that I have a lot of faith in that you'll see that they haven't necessarily popped recently. So that's how far I'm going with outsider, so to speak. But
how do you feel about Alex Chekya at the min price, $6,600? Any interest?
Absolutely not.
Checky was a model darling because he had a really good stretch through the swing season at one point. He was second and then ninth at Shriners and OHL. He doesn't have a finish higher than 50th so far in the season, in the actual calendar year of 2018. Valspar Championship over the years. He does have two. He's made the cut twice here before with a 14th last season, but now I don't think I can take the deep dive on Alex Chekya even at the mid price. Pat, do you still feel pretty good about Ben Martin? Trying to get a Rory Rose lineup and need someone under 7K? Yep, I'm still in. Brian Stewart, it is an interesting name under 7K. I don't know if Brian Stewart's ever interesting. No for me. You for Brian Stewart?
No. I mean, there's guys that we talked about that sub 7 or that lower salary range. No way.
Let's see some more. Let's go back to the Facebook chat. I've been ignoring that one for a second. How big of a difference do you see the ownership between Rose and Stenson? So I can actually tell you what I have projected out right now. I see it as being about a 5 to 8% difference in favor of Henrik Stenson. So, I mean, at the worst case scenario, you might see Stenson at 20 and Rose at 10. It's more likely to be like 21 and 13, something like that. But I do think that Stenson will be a lot higher owned than Rose will.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think, what we've seen with Rose, right? And we had a lot of projections last week, too, that, didn't necessarily come to fruition. But when you look at a guy like, especially in those top range, right, you have a baseline of what are they going to provide? And if you're playing GPP, you also have to ask yourself, what's your strategy as well? So if I'm going between those two, Stenson is, again, a guy that's been talked about quite a bit. I like him a lot. But in terms of DraftKings and going GPP, I would go with Rose, who's going to be close to that 10%, in my opinion.
Chris asks, give me something good on DeChambeau this week. Unfortunately, I cannot. He's Andercursed.
Yeah. Oh, poor guy.
And he wears a stupid hat, so there's that too.
And all of his clothes are the same length.
You talked about, Kyle asked about Sam Saunders. You like Sam Saunders more than I do. Tim asks about Adam Scott. What's your take? I really loved Adam Scott going into this week, and I don't know, it really soured me. I think when the pricing came out, I just started liking other guys in that range more. But if you start thinking about ball striking, and hey, listen, what's really the difference between Tony Finau and Adam Scott? Nothing, except for Adam Scott is cheaper this week. So, I mean, as a play, Adam Scott is a better value than Tony Finau. So I think that's a positive case for him. He probably has better win equity since, he wins events from time to time. And he won at Doral in the past. He won at Honda in the past. So he's clearly no stranger to Bermuda putting and at least not being the worst at it. So Adam Scott, better player right now and better play this week than Tony Finau. At least that's my take.
Yeah, Adam Scott is playing really nicely. I think if you want to go off of Finau because you think that his ownership's going to be high, Scott's standing out really nicely. Ball striking, I think he's top 3 in terms of over the last 24 rounds. Approach, right, tee to green. This is what this guy is doing. He's a pure ball striker. And right now, right, if he's the same thing like you were saying, he can't putt, but a guy who's won a major, who's been number 1. And we talked about this last week as well. He's been number 1. So the talent is there. It's just, can he put it all together in one round? And I wouldn't mind it.
Ricky asks, who's your favorite between Laird, I'm guessing that's Ben Silverman, or Chris Kirk? I like Chris Kirk the best, but I am using some Party Marty as well.
I was going to say, Party Marty is your boy. You can't go off of Party Marty.
No, I always have a share or two of Party Marty. Put it this way, I don't want to be late to the Marty party, if it ever happens.
Exactly. I like Party Marty and between those 3.
He does come in with 2 straight top 10s, and Valero is lurking in like 3 weeks where he does have a win. So maybe that's the time to get on Party Marty. We'll see. Cam Smith or Kevin Na in cash games? I would still go Cam Smith, although I think you could use both of them in cash games.
Yeah, you can use both, but I think Cam Smith for me. The Na is a guy who he plays really well on the West Coast swing. You've seen him pop a couple of times out in Florida, but I like him less on this side of the coast and more on the west. So I'm going Cam Smith there.
Dylon Johnson asks about Russell Knox. Is Russell Knox a good pivot? Probably, because he can have no ownership. I just don't like Russell Knox all that much, so I'm not using him.
Yeah, in current form, he's not playing well at all. I mean, yes, the price is there, and he's a guy that's popped before, and so I can see where that argument is coming from, but not for me as well.
Jeff Morris asks about Austin Cook. We already went over Austin Cook. We're both out on him this week. Kyle asks, Patrick Reed seems to be a sneaky play, only lacks fairways gained and made the past 3 cuts here with 2 top 10s. That's true. Patrick Reed was also good then, and he's not so good right now.
But what can save players at a course like this, right? Short courses always have a defense against players where if you're scrambling or around the green game is high, you can play well here. So a guy like Patrick Reed, if he can just find something where he was in the past, right? He can be a guy at that mid-7 or that mid to high 7s that can really pop, right? I like Zach Johnson a little bit better at that same price. I think you're on Ches Reavie a little bit more. But Patrick Reed, boy, man, if you can find half of what his game was last year, and maybe it's the Ryder Cup, maybe it's we're getting closer to the Ryder Cup, and that's really what type of guy like Patrick Reed plays for. Maybe we can see him pop. It's just I'm always too late on Patrick Reed or way too early.
Yeah, I just need to see him flash for him. I'm willing to be a week late on Patrick Reed. It's like how I want to be a week early on Rory. I'll be a week late on Patrick Reed. I just don't see the upside right now that goes along with him. Richard asks, is Charles Schwartzel worth a look this week? Absolutely, I think so. I think he's risky. I'd keep him away from my cash games. However, at his price, Brandt Snedeker's right there too, and I talked about them earlier. From the 75 and under range, these are the guys with all the win equity because we know that they can win. Charles won here before in 2 starts at the Valspar Championship. He has a 1st and a 6th. I know he's not playing well, but you mentioned Patrick Reed. Hey, do you want to be a week early? I'd rather be the week early on Sneds or Charles than Patrick Reed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of those guys, Charles and Brandt Snedeker, I mean, these guys, again, have proven to be able to win, especially in difficult fields. If you're looking at other course corollaries, look at the majors. This is a course that sets up nicely. That's why a lot of top players, and I'm sure why Rory and some of these guys are coming over and starting to play now, is because the course corollary here, I think last year it was ranked in the top 20 in most difficult courses, around 16 or 17. So when you look at those corollaries as well, take into account how these guys have played in the majors, because this course is extremely difficult and it plays extremely hard.
Jared asked about Chesson Hadley. We already went over Chesson Hadley. I'm kind of in, not much. Reed is super in on Chesson Hadley this week. Pat, how do things set up for Willie McGirt? Dirt McGirt from Richard Evans. Dirt McGirt's a really tough guy to figure out. The only thing you ever really want to do with him is bet him 1st round leader and move on unless he starts catching some form. And then he can maintain it. He just hasn't flashed that form yet and has a very poor track record at Valspar over the years. Yeah,
I'm going to be out on Dirt McGirt. I mean, he shows flashes. He's a pure ball striker, and we've seen it last year. But again, if you're playing in that price range, Poulter presents some value there, but we haven't seen it from Willie McGirt yet. So,
NDWS, how hard do you think 606 will be this year for the Valspar? I think it'll be easier than the Honda Classic. I hope it's easier than the Honda Classic. Probably not as easy as it was last week. But I mean, probably 10% of lineups. That's usually what we're looking at here. Even though it is a more difficult course, I think there's enough value in that lower area where you can find some quote-unquote safer guys. But there's always going to be the landmine out there. When Spieth misses the cut, you're going to be like, oh, that didn't help a lot. If Webb Simpson misses the cut, a lot of people are going to be screwed, myself included. So there's always one of those landmines every week that really prevents the 6 of 6 from getting up too high. Last call for questions. Facebook, YouTube, get them in now. We're going to try to round this out within the next 5-10 minutes and get out of here. Daniel Ryan asks, how about Scott Stallings this week? A great par 3 player. I will admit something, and this is hard for me to do. Scott Stallings rates out almost at the top of my model, whether I look at 8, 12, 24, 36, and I am just choosing to ignore that. I can't do it with Scott Stallings, and I know it's going to come back to burn me. I can feel it in my bones, but he can't continue to play this well. He just can't. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, that was like you were coming, with a confession there. It was, you really sat us all down and said, take a deep breath. Yeah, Scott Stallings, he ranks out number 1 in strokes gained par 3 over the last 24. So again, with all those par 3s in this course, I have some, but you're right. Like Scott Stallings is playing out of his mind right now. And if we're taking current form, because we are with some players, right? We're saying current form does matter, but with the top guys, we're saying current form doesn't. So I can see how Scott Stallings can make it into some of your lineups. I think I have him in a few, just because on a stat model basis, he's ranking out very nicely. But I can see why you can be off him, because he might be that landmine, right? He might be that landmine.
Rob asked about the Boz, Dominic Buzzelli. Where's the love? I actually have the Boz rated out as someone who, I don't want to say chalky, but chalky for his area. And if you're going to make Buzzelli like a chalky-ish player, and I can have everyone else around him at half or a third or the fourth of the ownership, I'm just not going to take Dominic Buzzelli. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, he popped, right? He came as top 5. last year. So yeah, he pops in that sense. But right, that's the only thing from a stat model or from recent history that we can say with Balzelli. So I like other guys better.
Next one is about, where is it? Kevin Streelman. It was right here on my page. It keeps jumping around on me. It's really strange. No mention of Streelman. Thoughts? That's from Trevor. I feel like I hit Streelman on Monday's show and Tuesday's show so hard that I like Streelman. I mean,
yeah,
not really much to say. Tee to green, he's like lights out. He's won this before. He makes basically every cut. So yeah, I like Kevin Streelman. Cash game, Kev.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first in green regulation, right? Game. This guy hits the ball. Again, we talk about it and we can't stress it enough. You want ball strikers here. You want tee to green. If you're playing weekends, right? He's a guy that stats out nicely tee to green. He's won here before. So yeah, all the boxes are checked for Streelman. So yeah, go with him.
Let's see. Joe asks, might be just a GPP flyer, but Seamus Power's recent form has not been great, but a T11 at Career Builder this year and a good performance at Valspar last year. I actually kind of had the same thought too because of that Career Builder performance, so I went and dug in to Seamus Power. Old Seamus, just a little bit. Did you know, Reid, that Seamus Power has lost strokes with his approaches in 9 straight tournaments, and the only reason that he was like actually making some cuts is because he was near the top of putting in every week that he ended up making the cut, and that was the only reason it happened. So no to Seamus Power for me. The brother Seamus, you're gone.
Yeah, he's just surviving, right? Poor guy. I mean, Pat Mayo just put Seamus on blast. But what do you think? I mean, a guy who's right around this, and we haven't talked about him. He's really popped on my stat model is Brandon Harkins. What is your thought on this guy? Because he's been a pro for quite some time, about 6 to 8 years. So he has experience. Obviously, we haven't seen him at all, but he's in decent form. What do you think of him?
He needs to get his irons going because if left on to gain strokes around the green, it's not going to happen. So Harkins has been really good for the first part of the season. He's been a value every single week. But once you get into this area, there's only so many guys that you can take, and Brendan Harkins just doesn't make the cut for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like him, in terms of this area. If I'm looking at, trying to roster some of these guys in that 7K, it's going to be Sam Saunders. And, I'm going to take a couple flyers on Brandon Harkins because I have a lot of lineups where I have speed. So I'm playing around in this area just a little bit. So,
all right, so we're going to try to hit one or more few questions because we're just seeing repeat questions now. So Russell Knox, already talked about it. Jamie Lovemark, already talked about it. Ollie Schneider-Jans, already talked about it. Billy Ho, back in Florida. Always got to play Billy Ho in Florida, right? I'm not, but that's always like the thing people say.
No Billy Ho. I mean, we talked about it a little bit previously at the Honda. No Billy Ho for me.
All right, so that was the end of the YouTube chat. I'll try to hit up the rest of the Facebook chat. Coke Rat from Jeff Todd. I mentioned him at the beginning about a GPP flyer I'm taking. I have him in 3 of 20 lineups, so that's where I'm at. Snorting the Coke Rack this week.
Yeah, no Coke Rack for me. I'm sorry. I'm laying off. Saying no to Coke Rack.
Would you go Stenson Garcia or Rory Rose? I think if you're playing cash games, Stenson Sergio makes a lot of sense. In GPPs, I just really think that Rory Rose stack is going to leave you really down in ownership and allow you to play a lot safer options in the 8s, 7s that way. So I would go Rory Rose. That is my most popular top-end stack this week for giant tournaments.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp because, obviously with GPP, this is not rocket science. You want low ownership, and you want Rory at that low 10, 6%, whatever we think it's going to be, which, right now, he's not playing well. So, I'd rather go that Rory Rose stack as well.
Dylon Johnson gets the last question in, and it's one we've already answered. Are you all in on List? Are you on List at all? Seems to have found some consistency this year. I agree, and his around the green game has been really good. However, as we mentioned off the top, I am out on Luke List. And Reid, you are all in on Luke List?
I'm not all. I'm not pushing all chips in. I got a couple of flyers on List because I think, why not? This guy was a darling last year. He sucked at putting, and now he's found something. So I'm gonna be in on List.
All right. For Reid Fowler, you can follow him on Twitter at ReidT.Fowler and follow his work on the DraftKings Playbook. For me, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at ThePME. Sub to the Pat Mayo Experience, PME, so you got that, at let's see, DraftKings video and Facebook video where you're watching this right now. Or if you're listening to the podcast, hey, thanks a lot. But if you're actually watching this on the video, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic, Audio Boom, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, wherever you can get podcasts, the Pat Mayo Experience will be there just waiting for you, free of charge. Please leave a review. Anyway, sub to Fantasy National and become a member to get all your stats and lineup generators and ownership projections. And all my work will be up on DraftKingsPlaybook.com, DKPlaybook.com. Probably the easier way to punch that in so it actually comes up. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. Like the episode. Good luck with the Valspar Championship. I'll see you next time.